What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Know Your Enemy. My name is TrendKiLL. Let's get into it. So today's episode was supposed to be about Zeus. However, there's some rumor that Zeus is going to be changing here very shortly, so I didn't want to create a video that was going to be obsolete within a few weeks. Instead of Zeus, today we're going to be talking about Poseidon, as the title above me states, I suppose. And if you're new to the series, in these videos, you're going to learn a brief overview of the god we're going to be talking about. We're also going to go in depth and talk a little bit more about their skills or their abilities, and then we're going to talk about some tips for how to play against that god. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the guide for the God of the Oceans. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is take a look at Poseidon's graph. Now you can see instantly that Poseidon is very one-sided. He excels in damage and he's decent at control and mobility, but he is lacking in every other possible category. Now don't be fooled by this graph. This is just looking at Poseidon as a whole, his own kit, his own character. In a team fight, provided a little setup, Poseidon is infinitely better than what this graph shows. So there are going to be times like that where a graph shows that a god might look bad, but he can actually bring a lot more to a team with a little bit of help from his allies. Now we'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute, but first let's talk about his abilities. First off, his passive is called Changing Tides, and this is a fairly interesting ability in the fact that it is essentially a stacking passive. Every time Poseidon hits somebody with a basic attack, it adds 10% to a tide level. So it's the equivalent of a 10 stack passive. As he uses his other abilities, it reduces his tide level. Now, as his tide level increases, he gains bonus damage and movement speed according to how high that level is. If he uses an ability at max rank, it will get a 20% damage bonus. Now, that's not something that you can monitor as you're playing against a Poseidon. You'll never know what his tide meter is, but you can assume if you're playing against a smart Poseidon that he's at least trying to get his tide meter up before he hits you with a large ability like his ultimate. In addition to that, for every stack that he has, remember that 10% is essentially one stack in a 10 stack maximum. For every 10% that he has built on his tide level, he will gain an extra 1% movement speed. Again, for a maximum of a 10% increase in his movement speed. So while this passive has a lot going on and can potentially be kind of confusing for a new Poseidon player, it shouldn't affect you playing against a Poseidon in any way. His first ability is called Tidal Surge, and this is a straight shot damaging ability, and really the only thing you need to know about it is that it has a bit of knockback on it. As enemies, whether they be minions or gods, get hit by Tidal Surge, it just pushes them back a little bit. One thing to note, however, this removes 35% from your tide meter. So your tide level will go down by about a third every time you use Tidal Surge. Now once you lose that level, again, auto attacks or basic attacks are going to bring that level back up. Now if you've never played Poseidon before, you might be wondering, dude, TrendKiLL, I'm a mage. I know I'm not supposed to be basic attacking people. I'm an ability-based character. How can I consistently get my tide level up? Enter his second ability, Trident. First off, this ability takes no tide level when using it. Secondly, this turns Poseidon's single basic attack into a range of 3 basic attacks, making it 1, much easier to hit those basic attacks, and 2, every single one of those attacks increases your tide level by 10%. This means that if your tide level is all the way down to 0, is completely empty, if you hit them all, you can fill your tide level up in 4 basic attacks. In addition to that, you also gain anywhere between 5 and 25% movement speed depending on what rank the ability is. His third ability, Whirlpool, this is the ability that in my opinion makes Poseidon. This can be a very annoying ability to have to play against. Essentially, this is an area of effect spell, and anything inside that area is crippled and slowly pulled toward the center, all while taking a damage over time. This can be a very scary ability considering the fact that this will shut down escape moves. Remember, crippling abilities do not allow jumps, dashes, or teleports. And the last thing about this ability is that it removes 25% from your tide meter. And finally, his ultimate, Release the Kraken. This is, for a new player, one of those mind-blowing ultimates where the first time you see it, you're like, what the f*** was that? Essentially, in a fairly massive area, Poseidon creates a humongous pool of water, and in the center of that water, he releases the Kraken. Now, this ability takes a little bit of explaining. This is a large area, but in the center of that large area, the ability is actually more powerful and does more things. First off, let's talk about the outer ring, the outside of the ability. It does 270 damage plus 30% of your magical power and slows for 30%. The center of the ability, however, does 340 damage plus 60% of your magical power, so we're already 70 flat damage and 30% more scaling, and the 30% slow, and at max rank it stuns for 2 seconds, and knocks everybody it hits up. It adds 70% damage, a 30% scaling, a 2-second stun, and a knock-up. That's a ton of stuff going on for new players to comprehend, so just understand Kraken equals bad news. And the last thing to know about the Kraken is that it will reduce your Tide meter by 50%. Anyway, I explained enough about the abilities, we've talked about his graph, let's go ahead and move into the mechanics section where we're going to talk about some tips on how to play against a Poseidon. So let's go ahead and jump right into Tidal Surge. Now this is a very slow skill shot. Poseidon is very rarely going to use it to try to hit you at a long distance. However, if he does, it's very easy to just sidestep it one way or the other. Now it is so slow that it can be a bit deceiving on how far it will actually travel, so I would not recommend running away from it, just sidestep it left or right. Now because this is so slow, Poseidon is generally going to use it for one of 3 purposes. 1, he's going to use it to help himself clear a lane. 2, he's going to use it to finish you off if he happens to hit you in a Whirlpool and then smack you with Kraken and you fall down and he throws his tidal wave right at you. 3, he might use it to defend himself by knocking you back away from him. Now again, he can use it offensively, but it's not a very reliable ability considering it does move so slow. His second ability, Trident, is kind of an odd ability for a mage, but it does actually open up several options for Poseidon. The bad news is, it's his only escape. He doesn't have a dash or a jump or a teleport. Poseidon can only move faster. Now that's not the worst news ever because he's at least 10% faster from his passive and 25% faster from Trident anyway, but the instant relief from a jump, dash, or teleport is far more important than just moving a little bit quicker. The bad thing about him moving quickly is that he can almost always stay aggressive. A lot of Guardians or Assassins will wait to see a character use their jump, dash, or teleport before going in and trying to gank that player. This is because in general terms, a god who has a jump, dash, or teleport, their kit is balanced around the fact that they have a jump, dash, or teleport. He is just always innately faster. So while it is a disadvantage, it's also kind of an advantage if you try to skew it into an advantage. For the next tip, this should seem a little bit obvious, but if you are playing mid against a Poseidon and there are no minions around and you guys are just kind of boxing each other with auto attacks, don't box Poseidon. He's got 3, you only have 1. Trident is going to allow him to be more mobile, so he's going to dance around your shots easier, and he's going to be slinging 3 shots at you. Without abilities, that is a fight that you're nearly guaranteed to lose. And last but not least, this ability definitely opens up the possibility to build Poseidon as a basic attack-centered god. A lot of the times what you'll see people do is build attack speed and movement speed items, and then what they'll do is they'll run around, be super fast, super annoying, and use their basic attacks to do the bulk of their damage. Now is this an optimal build? Probably not, but I can say from experience that it is a ton of fun to move around that quickly. So don't be surprised if you see somebody playing Poseidon who's just trying to have fun using the fastest possible build they can manage so they can zoom around the map and smack people with basic attacks. His third ability, Whirlpool, can be devastating. Now this has obviously become a pattern in these videos, but you have to remember that when you are playing against a character that has such a debilitating ability like Whirlpool, that you almost have to have some sort of cleansing ability like Purification Beads. I would venture a guess that Purification Beads has been mentioned in almost every episode of Know Your Enemy, and that is very important to understand because Purification Beads is not a necessity, not a requirement, but is very highly recommended on almost every character and every build. This is a very underrated item for new players, and I can't stress this enough. Buy it and get used to using it. Okay, end rant, let's get into some tips on Whirlpool. First off, the cripple doesn't proc instantly, and by proc what I mean is it does not happen instantly. As soon as the Whirlpool is forming, you're not crippled. There's a little bit of a leeway in there, so if you're playing a god like Agni who's playing against Poseidon in the mid lane, as he throws a Whirlpool underneath you, you do have the ability to make a split-second decision on whether or not you need to dash out of that Whirlpool. If you think he's going to Kraken you, a dash might not be the worst idea in the world. Another thing is that this is probably one of the best zoning tools in the game, considering the fact that it is probably one of the best and most deadly cripples in the game. Cripple in a large area like Whirlpool, in addition to the equivalent of a slow, considering it's pulling you towards the center and you're tugging against that, coupled with the fact that you don't have a dash or a jump or a teleport that can get you right out of it before the cripple actually activates, and the fact that if he does catch you in the Whirlpool while you're not expecting it, you can almost guarantee a Kraken on top of you. This ability just sucks. I don't know any other way to say it. If you're playing against a Poseidon, this ability is just, it's horrible. And I mean that in the most positive way I can, because it's a great ability, it just sucks to play against. Now, since I've already mentioned it, let's go ahead and talk about his ultimate, Release the Kraken. The Whirlpool into Kraken combination is by far the biggest move you're going to see a Poseidon try and pull off. For Poseidon, the cool thing about that combination is that the knockup, if he happens to catch you in the middle of the Kraken, the knockup while in a Whirlpool has some interesting mechanics. While you're being knocked up, you're still being pulled to the center. So Poseidon knows where you're gonna land and can properly aim a Tidal Surge to smack you as you land. High damage, plus stuns, plus knockups, plus cripples, plus being pulled in the middle, plus knockbacks from Tidal Surge. This can be a very disorienting combo, and for new players, you might just stare at your screen going, why did I just move in so many directions without me doing it? So let's talk about some options. What do? Well, if you're capable of taking all of that damage, like say you're a Guardian or something like that, you can use Purification Beads, which will cleanse the cripple, will cleanse the pull, the knockback, the knockup, the stun, and the slow from the Kraken. That one active ability will eliminate all of those things. Now that just leaves you with the damage from those three abilities. In addition to that, Purification Beads will reduce the cooldown on all of the abilities that you have on cooldown currently, allowing the Guardian or the Warrior, whoever can take that amount of damage, to be ready to retaliate with their own abilities. So Purification Beads, great choice if you can take that damage. What if you're a squishy mage? You can't do that. In that case, I would probably recommend some form of the Aegis Amulet. This allowed you to avoid all of the effects and all the damage, but incapacitates you through it all. Now, this doesn't allow you to retaliate, because obviously you incapacitated yourself in the middle of all that, and this doesn't reduce your cooldowns, so it's going to have to be a judgment call for you. If you're squishy, I would probably go with Aegis Amulet. If you're not, I would probably go with Purification Beads to give you a few more options. Now, furthermore, you can replace Whirlpool in that combo with any other form of hard CC from any other character in the game and be just as successful. Remember earlier on the graph when I told you that Poseidon could do a lot more than what the graph actually shows? This is when teamwork is going to be required. If you have somebody like an Amir or an Athena who can really round up a team, or like an Ares who can catch people with their beads on cooldown and can pull them all to a center location, that makes abilities like the Kraken infinitely more powerful. And last but not least, one final tip for Poseidon: once you hit level 5 in the mid lane against a Poseidon, be very careful. Odds are you may not have backed yet, you may have not started with Purification Beads or Aegis Amulet, and odds are as soon as he hits 5, he's going to attempt to throw you in a Whirlpool and Kraken you. At very least, that's probably going to do enough damage to force you to back. If you can avoid that, or you did happen to purchase Beads or Aegis early on, you can instead force Poseidon back because he has no more ultimate, he's probably run himself fairly low on mana trying to do that to you, and he's gonna have to back instead of you. So there are small battles of attrition like that you're gonna have to watch out for, but it feels so good to Aegis Amulet a Kraken and have all this crazy crap going on around you and walk away like nothing happened. Again, speaking from experience, this is so deflating as a Poseidon player when something like that happens.
So there you have it, guys. That's going to do it for the guide. Hopefully you learned enough about Poseidon today to feel comfortable playing against him should you find him in one of your games. So thanks for stopping by and hanging out with me, and hopefully you enjoyed yourself enough to come check us out next week when we're going to be talking about Anubis, the god of the dead.